All right, we are live, and Kim is stuck in traffic on her way here. So she said to go ahead and start without her. So for right now, you've got me and Carrie, and on this great Thursday. So I will go ahead and cue our intro.
That always pumps me up. Yeah, we gonna pump you
Me
up.
up too. Awesome. So how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. My place of employment is putting me through my paces, making me think a lot. So at least I won't have Alzheimer's, I don't think. Lots of brain exercise going on, so keep me young.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to have to run after this. I was going to go vote. I actually was going to early vote, but I didn't. And so then I was going to vote at lunch, and lunch sort of got put off. So,
Yeah.
it's like I checked and the polls are open till 7 our time. So I'll have time to go. I
Yeah.
think it's right down the street. So I don't think it's going to be a huge number of people voting. This is kind of a weird, it kind of threw me off because it was on a Thursday, because normally elections are on Tuesday, but I guess when they do primaries or something, then they'll do it on a different day, but it threw me off anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. Well, I'm glad that you're able to make it and the work didn't have you too swamped that you couldn't join us. So, and obviously Kim, like she says, she's stuck in traffic. So this
That's
is just going to
fun.
be, yeah, we just will make do. She'll join us when she can. So I don't know if anyone, was here for our Sunday book club meeting, but we spent a lot of time talking about labs, and I promised I would get my blood drawn on Monday. And I did, and I am a pincushion. It took 5 pokes, two people, and the 4th poke was successful, but there were too many tubes to fill, so we needed a 5th poke on the other arm.
No, man. Ugh.
So yeah, this is one reason why I'm like I hate going and getting labs drawn, because I just turn into the human pincushion because my veins roll, and I've been told they're deeper than they appear. I was really hoping that me losing 100 pounds would help, but it did
Your
not.
veins are running and hiding. They're going, not today.
It's like I see a little bit of sunlight coming through. It's getting closer, so I'm just going to retreat even further. Oh my
Like,
word. Yeah. So I'm hoping that I'll have the results I should have gotten. I went to a different place that I haven't been to before. And so I probably should call them and get a MyChart account. But I do have a LabCorp account, and it was a LabCorp lab. And so I don't see the results yet. And I'm not sure why, because they told me it should only take like a day to get most of them. So we'll see. This is Thursday. If I don't have the results by like maybe first thing in the morning, I'll probably call over and see if I can get access to like my chart account and see if they have them that way. But I'm hoping to have them for Sunday, because I know we were going to be continuing to go through the lab information on our book. So, but anyways, we'll find out. Oh, and Kim's here. Perfect. So we have, yay, you made it.
Hey guys, are we live?
Yes, we
Yeah,
are.
we're live.
Okay.
We're live. But we just been shooting the breeze for the last few minutes, so you're barely even late.
Okay. I got stuck in traffic.
Yeah.
Shoot.
But for those of you who haven't been here with us, we are going through this textbook. It is called Ketogenic, The Science of Therapeutic Carbohydrate Restriction in Human Health. And this is not a book club where we read ahead and then talk about it. This is a unique way of doing things, that it is a study club, and we actually we read to each other and we discuss as we go. So if this is a really, really meaty book, it's a textbook for the medical profession. Yeah. So if you're nerdy science nerds, you may like this, hopefully. And yeah. So did you get your book pulled up and everything, Kim, yet?
Oh yeah, I've got a book here.
Okay. Cool. Cool. All right. You doing okay?
Yeah, just like rushing in here. It's like, so I just did it outside. It's really hot out here, but I didn't have time to set up my indoor stuff. So,
Yeah. All right. Well, that's all right. So we left off on page 29 and section 1.2.2.5.1 called type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, and other endocrine disorders. And all right. I'll start reading, I guess, and read that section. Let you get yourself situated, Kim. All righty. So the first little subsection is called type 2 diabetes. As previously described, untreated chronic insulin resistance will lead to beta cell failure, glucagonemia, big word, and hyperglycemia, which with its feed forward cycle will worsen with time, eventually leading to a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes. Hyperglycemia synergistically adds to damage caused by hyperinsulinemia through the production of AGEs and other glycated proteins. Stimulation of cellular growth and proliferation, especially vascular smooth muscle via IGF-1, and increased blood coagulability independent of insulin concentration. So that's pretty straightforward. Your beta cells start to cell and things start to worsen and you get type 2 diabetes. And then gestational diabetes is the next part. It says gestational diabetes is also associated with hyperinsulinemia. Increased pregnancy-induced insulin resistance, which is quote unquote IRP, is a normal phenomenon of the second and third trimesters of pregnancy to ensure the developing fetus has an adequate nutrient supply. Oh, I didn't know that. Pregnancy-induced insulin resistance. So you normally get insulin resistant in the second, third trimesters. Okay. However, pre-pregnancy chronic insulin resistance compounded by pregnancy-induced insulin resistance results in the fetus receiving overnutrition combined with glycemic and oxidative stress and systemic inflammation, even if the mother does not fulfill diagnostic criteria for gestational diabetes. Insulin does not cross the placenta. However, the fetal response to this overnutrition and inflammatory environment is to develop fetal hyperinsulinemia and excessive growth, which may present as hyperglycemia and macrosomia at birth. As the child grows and develops, their gestational environment may result in long-term impaired appetite regulation, mitochondrial function, and potential brain and nerve development. Consequently, the child may have increased predisposition to developing chronic insulin resistance with subsequent consequences at an earlier age. Within the mother, it is believed that due to the feed-forward mechanisms, pregnancy-induced insulin resistance can increase the risk of chronic insulin resistance, thus explaining their increased risk of developing type 2 diabetes or other metabolic diseases later in life. Mm-hmm. So am I understanding this right, that you can be just insulin resistant in pregnancy and your baby can end up with macrosomia? You don't have to have actual gestational diabetes. Is that what it sounds like? Or am I reading that?
The fetal response is to develop fetal hyperinsulinemia and excessive growth.
Yeah, because it says even if
insulin does not cross the placenta. So I guess because of chronic insulin resistance compounded by the insulin resistance during pregnancy results in the fetus receiving overnutrition. So,
Yeah, and it says even if the mother doesn't fulfill the diagnostic criteria for gestational diabetes, this can happen.
mhm.
So, I mean, that was my understanding when I read it. Is that you don't even have to have gestational diabetes, and your baby can be impacted if your insulin levels are high.
I was going to say, I wonder if it's kind of similar to just in general how we can have essentially, pre-diabetes for years without even knowing it. It's probably because they don't
Right.
test insulin.
Oh, good point, Kim. I bet that's it. That makes sense. That makes sense.
I mean, there's just
Yeah.
a general misunderstanding of, how long these things are going on before, like they act like you just flip a switch from, 6.4 to 6.5 and there you go. Now you're
There you go.
diabetic.
Yep.
Right.
And I mean,
Right.
part of it is you have to have a cutoff point somewhere. So it's kind of like you really just want to nip it in the bud before you get to that point. But
Yeah.
and see, that's something that always concerned me because I did have gestational diabetes. And like my daughter was born almost a month early and she weighed 7 pounds, 3 ounces.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then my son,
Yeah.
they retested me. That was a whole strange sequence of events, but they did retest me and said that I didn't have it. And I think part of the reason I failed the glucose tolerance test the first time with my son is because I was conscious of the carbs, like how many, I mean, I wasn't like strict keto or anything, but I was very, because I had gone through that with my daughter and they had told me not to eat that stuff. So then fast forward 10 years when I had my son, and so I failed my first glucose tolerance test and they told me that if that was accurate that I would need insulin. So then I went back, and because I had done it before, and like Dr. Bickman talks about, like then my pancreas was like, oh, she needs more of that initial bolus. And I think, but I passed. But I think I still had that tendency because he was 9 pounds and an ounce. I carried him. He was only a week early, and he weighed over 9 pounds.
Okay. Wow. Wow. So based on what we just read, it could be that you were still, you had high insulin levels, pregnancy. They call pregnancy induced insulin resistance, and that alone can cause the baby to be big. So that's interesting. I hadn't heard that before.
And so I was afraid then in later years that I was going to become diabetic, and I didn't want that, or type 2 diabetic.
Oh, right.
And I mean, not that anybody wants it, but I mean, that's just a big fear I had because it just ran in my family, and I saw how it, especially with my mother, what happened with her. So, but anyway, I've been through the whole gestational diabetes thing. And
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Interesting. Okay. So the next little subsection is called double diabetes. In recent years, there is an increasing prevalence of people with type 1 diabetes developing insulin resistance, manifesting with increased doses of insulin or hyperinsulinemia to maintain glycemic control, along with other symptoms of metabolic syndrome. It remains uncertain whether double diabetes is a separate phenotype of type 1 diabetes or simply a consequence of modern living and change of therapy guidelines over the last 20 years, resulting in overnutrition and chronic insulin resistance. So I guess they become insulin resistant, but it's not the insulin their pancreas is producing because their pancreas isn't working. The beta cells aren't working. It's the insulin, the injectable insulin that they're becoming
resistant. What we were talking about the other day.
Mm-hmm.
Remember?
We sure were.
When I said it backwards.
Yeah. Yeah. So interesting. Double diabetes. So basically they've got type 1 diabetes, and I don't know. That doesn't sound like they're saying for sure that they're actually developing type 2 diabetes, but it sounds like they're not quite sure what to call it.
Sounds like they're type 1 and then they're becoming insulin resistant.
Yeah.
So.
And exactly. Which really type 2 is caused by insulin resistance, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what type 2 is. So they are both. I mean, they're becoming both.
It's like type 2 on type 1.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. So that's interesting. So, all right. Oh, so Mike is saying hi, weird. Oh, yeah. Weird to be weird, proud to be weird. That's Cynthia. All right. So yeah, Mike was saying hi to Cynthia. Said my apologies. I don't know her name. Yeah, you
Hi,
probably
weird.
weren't here when she told us her name. So
You could have
she
been
said that
talking
we're-
to any of us because I'm weird too.
That's weird. Exactly. That could be any of us. Okay, so the last little subsection is polycystic ovarian syndrome, which I was diagnosed with when I was in my mid 20s, started having symptoms when I was 20 years old. Still, I'm not 100% sure if that was really accurate, but probably was. So hyperinsulinemia, hyperandrogenism, and anovation, which is not ovulating, are core pathophysiological elements of polycystic ovarian syndrome. As hyperinsulinemia is associated with increased androgen production and decreased sex hormone binding globulin production, thus worsening symptoms. People with PCOS have a high prevalence of metabolic syndrome with heightened hyperinsulinemia and decreased insulin sensitivity compared to their obese peers, even during adolescence. As with pregnancy, PCOS or any condition that involves hyperinsulinemia will be compounded by external factors that further increase insulin resistance. So I know that when I first got diagnosed, like when I first started having symptoms actually of PCOS was like very, very early in 1989. And then it was just like, oh, just put you on a birth control pill to just control the cycles. It was really looked at as strictly a reproductive or female issue and it seemed like it was maybe not too much later, maybe, I mean, within the decade, but maybe like 5 years later or so is when they said, okay, well, we're starting to use metformin because they started to realize that there's a connection there with, insulin and your blood sugar. And so they put me on metformin. It did nothing for me. So, which is why I kind of wonder, like, did I really have PCOS or was it my mast cell activation syndrome messing up my hormones back then? Because I didn't know I had it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, but at least now it seems with PCOS that they do see that it's a metabolic disorder, not just that just happens to affect the female organs, more than it did before.
Here's the weird thing. I had a lot of symptoms of it. Like I had terrible times of the month when especially like when I was like 13, like when I first had started having those. And my dad would have to come. We had one car at the time and my dad drove it. And he would come pick me up. It was guaranteed. Once a month, he'd have to pick me up from school and take me home. And it was very painful and there was a lot of it. But then what's really odd though is, I mean, it wasn't hard. It wasn't difficult for me to get pregnant. I mean, it was like, it happened when I was 19, not expecting it at all. And I was real thin. So it was just strange how I was this weird hybrid person. I would love to talk to like Dr. Bickman or somebody and pick their brain about me because I did have symptoms of it, but it was just, but the fertility was like Dr. Kiltz, talks about the fertility. Boy, I was always fertile. Like when I had gotten off of my birth control, when I went to have, I was going to have my son. And I mean, it took me 1 month. That was it. 1 month off of birth control. And I've been on it for like 9 years. So this is crazy.
And we did artificial insemination 4 times. It never worked. But, for me, when I started having the symptoms of PCOS at the exact same time is when I really started picking up weight because, before I started having symptoms, like when I was 19, I'm 5'8" and I weighed 150 pounds. And I know that that's heavier than you, Carrie, but you're very, very small. I'm a normal frame person. So for me at 5'8", 150 pounds, I was lean. Like I didn't have any fat on me. And then I started picking up weight at the same time that my cycles got irregular. So I don't know if the added weight could have potentially, I mean, obviously their insulin resistance was there. It was like shouting from the rooftops, you're insulin resistant, because everything was going wonky and none of the fertility treatments ever worked for me. So, all my kids are adopted and I never could get pregnant. But and the metformin didn't do anything. The doctor, I remember the doctor telling me, you take metformin and the metformin is actually like reversing PCOS and women are able to get pregnant. So I was really hopeful and optimistic. No, didn't happen. So Amy says we should have should invite Dr. Bickman on the channel. Oh yeah, that would be awesome.
It sure would. Says, I have some questions.
These chicks are taller than me. Kim's like, not me.
I'm 5'2", barely. I'm actually 5'1.5" or 3/4, but
you're petite.
Someday when we all meet, we all get together, you're gonna feel like you're standing in a hole next to me and Carrie.
I'm used to it.
Carrie's even taller than I am.
In high school, well, from the time I was 2 on up until last year. Well, last April when she passed, but we were best friends, and she was a little bitty thing, like 5'1", and no bigger around than a minute, they say, and I was this tall, lanky, and it was just so funny. It was like Mutt and Jeff or something, us two together, because like she maybe came up to my shoulder or a little bit higher. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. There was just such a disparity in our height and stuff.
Oh yeah. That was the same thing with me and my best friend. She was like up to here on me most of the time growing up. She started to catch up. She didn't quite catch up. I think she got to be maybe 5'5", but at least it was, it was funny with us. Because as kids, you look like why is this older girl hanging out with this, itty bitty, like, is this your babysitter?
Yeah.
That's funny.
All right. You want to go? Did you have issues like that? Or did you have gestational diabetes, or did you have PCOS?
Did I?
Things that affected.
No, I never had. Now, I had painful periods when I was younger, but like it was mainly when I was 16, and I think I was just maybe not quite used to it, so I think it hurt me worse than it probably would have now, and then I had a lot of pain with my periods when I was on, probably in my 30s, but that was endometriosis, and I was diagnosed with that
I was too later.
They did a laparoscopic surgery, which is the way they diagnosed that. And they get in there and look around, and they said it wasn't as bad as, they usually see. But yeah, I was fertile myrtle, so I had no problems with that at all. But I do have several cysts on my ovaries, though. Whenever I had my hysterectomy, which was that was a whole different reason. Whenever I had that, they took one of my ovaries, and they took the one that kept having, I had one ovary that had like a bunch of cysts on it. So I don't know if that was
on the outside of the ovary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's different than PCOS, because PCOS is the eggs can't release from the ovary and turn into cysts. And but then they dissolve back into the tissue of the ovary. But while you have it and when it's big, it's really painful. Like I remember feeling it every month, and it would switch sides. So I knew that my ovaries were trying to ovulate. And I didn't have, I had enough follicle stimulating hormone, but not enough luteinizing hormone, which is what releases the egg from the ovary.
Yeah.
And so, so I would feel it in there big and almost like putting pressure, like trying to escape, but it couldn't. Mm-hmm. And then it would subside. but yeah, I'd have horrible periods. I know my longest period, I was in my 20s, lasted 11 months.
Oh
Oh
my
heavens.
gosh, that's awful.
I
You
was
poor thing.
losing my mind. Like literally, I was starting to lose my mind because, and it wasn't like it was heavy the whole time. It was most of the time it was light, but then at the very end, I ended up in the ER because it got really heavy and I was like gushing blood. But, it was like psychologically, I
Mhm.
remember my husband and I at the time, we lived in an apartment. We were young. And I remember when I could not get away from the bleeding. And I was one day, I remember he was worried about me. I was like rolling around on the floor, like you're trying to put yourself out like on fire, like you're just trying to, stop, drop, and roll. I
Mhm.
was losing my mind. And I was
Yeah.
rolling around on the carpet like I was trying to get it off of me. And that was probably my low point for sure. But I mean, it's no joke having a period that long. And then I would have shorter ones, but they'd be so heavy. I remember I'd have to layer towels on the bed, and then I remember I'd line my underwear. This is TMI. Sorry, Mike. But I'd have to line my underwear with 10 maxi pads all around. I should have this was before, I didn't even think about getting an adult diaper, right? I was in my 20s. And then midway through the night, it'd be so drenched, I would have to go in the shower, hose myself off, rinse and repeat basically, and then to get through the rest of the night. And I would do that for like nights in a row. It was just, yeah. So
It's awful.
if I had known back then the insulin resistance connection, oh man, would I have stopped eating carbs? You can't tell me that I would have gone, oh no, I'm not going to try that. It's just too hard to avoid
Hmm.
carbs. I was suffering.
Yeah.
Mike says, "Hello, I feel like I'm watching
Yeah.
the lionesses on TikTok."
We are lionesses. We're just
We
not
are.
those lionesses.
That's right. That's right. That's our TikTok. Hey, it's the part of the book we're talking about
Yeah,
PCOS, and
this
I
is
have
true.
firsthand experience.
And this is really an issue for a lot of people, and it's becoming more and
Yeah,
more common. And fertility issues are just on the rise. I mean, the birth rate has gone down so much, and I believe it has a
yeah.
lot to do with all of this.
The
Um,
food. That's
I
right,
know
Amy.
that
Adult diapers, yeah, weren't really a thing back then. It's not as much.
that's true. That's
Yeah.
true. But yeah, I had it was in my 30s. It was terrible. That time of the month was really bad, and it was it got to the point where then they checked me and everything, and I had my uterus was prolapsed and I had endometriosis. And since I was finished having children, I just went ahead and told them to take it out. And
Yeah.
so because they could have gone in and they said they could actually go in and like put it back where it's supposed to go. But I was like, nah, that's okay. I don't
Yeah.
need it anymore. I'm done. So I did still keep my ovaries and everything, but
Yeah. Yeah.
so I didn't
Well, I
have the
know when
side effects like a lot of people, who don't have their ovaries do. But I just
when I
wonder
was
what was going
diagnosed,
on with me because,
well, it might have been PCOS. I mean, it was
yeah.
really not diagnosed very well. When I was diagnosed, it was maybe 1993, a few years after I started having symptoms, and I was told it was rare. But just like with my mast cell activation syndrome and my hereditary alpha tryptosemia, they're both still listed as rare diseases, but they're not. I mean, as
Mhm.
I listen to the experts, they're not. And so I think we have a lot of things that, we've learned, like PCOS isn't rare, but it may have originally been rare because it was probably cropped up when people started eating garbage food.
Mhm.
I mean, so many people, yeah, there may not have been nearly as many people with PCOS,
Well,
but
it's
it is
like
a development.
diabetes,
Yeah,
type 2 was rare. Both
yeah,
type 1 and type 2 were rare. And
but
then
we're eating
now
a
there's
diet full of endocrine
yeah.
disruptors.
Mhm.
So, okay, well, let's go to the next
Yeah.
section. I know we could talk about
Okay.
this one all day. All right, Carrie, you want to do the next section?
Sure. 1.2.2.5.2 hepatic disease. The liver is the major organ for controlling lipid homeostasis and fatty acid metabolism. Despite processing large amounts of fatty acids, a healthy liver contains less than 5% triglycerides by weight. However, between 50% to 75% of people with either obesity and or type 2 diabetes are affected by non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, NAFLD. NAFLD describes a spectrum of hepatic fat accumulation from steatosis through fibrosis and or cirrhosis. As described above, a combination of hyperinsulinemia and insulin resistance increases hepatic triglyceride concentrations via overnutrition, de novo lipogenesis, or systemic fatty acid metabolism. Increased lipogenesis increases endoplasmic reticulum and mitochondrial oxidative stress, which promotes further lipid accumulation in a feed-forward process. Excessive fat accumulation within the liver triggers inflammatory responses within the lipocytes, which can lead to hepatocyte death and further inflammatory responses. When hepatocyte death rates surpass the processes that regenerate healthy cells, alternative pathways are initiated that result in the distorted cellular architecture found in fibrosis. If the fibrotic pathways are maintained, cirrhosis may follow. While hyperinsulinemia is a key driver of NAFLD, it remains uncertain whether NAFLD is a causal or only an associative factor for insulin resistance. However, as fibrosis develops and impairs hepatic function, this has a negative impact on many body functions, including glucose and lipid homeostasis and increased hepatic fibrinogen production.
Yeah. So the you don't have to have fatty liver to get cirrhosis. Obviously, you can get alcoholic, from drinking alcohol, but there's the stages. I'd see that working at, like, I not just worked in GI, but I worked in hepatology, specialized in hepatology too as a nurse, and dealt with a lot of patients that had it on the whole spectrum. So you'd have fatty liver disease, which is a steatosis, fat accumulation. And of course, the doctors would tell them, you got to lose weight. But it was interesting because I know one of my coworkers was thin as a rail and had a fatty liver. And here I was 350 pounds and I had a CT scan and I didn't have a fatty liver. And all my fat was hanging out, in other parts of my body. But you don't have to be overweight to have a fatty liver. You can be really thin and have a fatty liver. But if, losing the weight isn't necessarily the thing.
It just goes to show how little they really understand this, It's crazy.
Well, I never heard any of the doctors, and I know we talked about this in previous books that we've reviewed in our book club about fructose. And fructose, the liver doesn't know what to do with it, and that ends up leading to fatty liver. And I mean, we live in a society where fructose has been a huge part of our diet, not just with eating fruit, but like high fructose corn syrup is in everything, right? And here we have an increase in fatty liver disease. And so it'd be interesting to see these doctors tell people to get the fructose out of your diet and to reverse it instead of lose weight. Because what does someone do if they're thin as a rail and the doctor tells them to lose weight?
Right.
Like, what do you mean lose weight?
So the question I've always had, and the reason why I asked this is because you do see people like who eat only fruit. And I mean, they look pretty healthy. I don't know. I don't know that for sure, but it's like, it makes you wonder, if you eat the fruit in its whole form, I feel like that doesn't have the effect on fatty liver that all the high fructose corn syrup
Probably not.
without the, the precious fiber.
It's probably not, because it takes a lot of fruit probably to equal what you get with high fructose corn syrup.
I mean, there are people who only eat fruit.
Right.
There's a guy on TikTok and he
Vegetarians.
sits there and eats this fruit all day, every day. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is freaking me out.
Mike says, my understanding is when you cut the carbs, your liver is the first to lose fat. Does that sound right to y'all? I don't know.
I've heard that. And I don't know, I can't say specifically where I heard that.
So I remember hearing it in I think it was in one of the books that we've read. And it said that basically you gain, or maybe it was on Dr. Berry and that other doctor that always talks about visceral fat, whatever his name is. But
Sean O'Mara.
So he said that you gain the sub-Q fat first, and then you gain visceral fat, and then liver, and then fat on your fatty liver, and then you lose it in the reverse order. You lose the liver fat, and then you lose the visceral fat, and then you lose the sub-Q fat. That's why you can be quite healthy on the inside and still have quite a bit of, sub-Q fat.
Yeah. So Mike says, I have NAFLD and I'm not particularly overweight and have not drank alcohol for 10 years. Don't eat fast food. My chronic kidney disease improved, but NAFLD got worse on carnivore last month's blood 6 months ago.
Really?
Did you have a fiber scan?
Maybe.
Or yeah. Oh, sorry. This is Sandra. I'm sorry. I thought it was Mike. Sandra, did you have a fiber scan or something because that's usually what you do is you get a fiber scan to to see what the liver's doing. Curious to know.
And I'm curious, how long were you on carnivore when you said it got worse? Because I would expect just the opposite. I don't see the mechanism by which fatty liver would get worse.
Well, I'd be curious to know what got worse. Is it like that's why I asked, did you have a fiber scan and actually have a scan of your liver, or was it your liver enzymes? Because when you have fatty liver and if you change your diet and you lose weight, you can actually have your liver enzymes go up.
Yeah.
Because losing weight, because fatty liver, you really need to address it slowly and lose weight slowly, because if you lose weight too fast, it will actually cause your liver enzymes to go up. It'll be harder on your liver. So that possibly might be what you're experiencing. But that should have, reversed. It should have come down. I mean, elevated, the doctors, their liver specialists, they didn't get too, they would be concerned about elevated liver enzymes, but it's not an acute situation until they're like 10 times more than above the high range of normal.
Yeah.
So
I've heard Dr. Berry and some of the other reputable doctors online talking about how, your liver enzymes, they can be elevated for a short period of time for any number of reasons. It doesn't necessarily mean, it's not necessarily an ominous sign, put it that way.
Right. And when they are elevated, it can take a long time for them to come back down. And as long as they're trending in the right direction, then it's just something to monitor. So she says, no, my blood markers were all he was going on. But vancomycin, it could be to blame. I was carnivore 7 months, then I expect it to be better. Yeah. So it could absolutely, medication can cause an increase in liver enzymes for sure.
And also, did he know you were carnivore, and did he not want you to be carnivore and try to scare you out of being carnivore by telling you that your fatty liver was getting worse? Because that's what sounds like what my doctor would do.
Yeah. I would not jump to the conclusion that the fatty liver was worse. Fatty liver can get better and increase the liver enzymes. Like I said, if it's too fast. So I know our docs that I worked with, when they had somebody with elevated liver enzymes, of course, there's a whole crazy battery of tests that they run. But if all of those don't point to anything serious, they just monitor. And lots of times I'd have patients call and go, what, the doctor doesn't want to see me for another follow-up for another 6 months? It's like, well, yeah, it can take a long time for your liver enzymes to go back down to normal. So just as long as they're heading in the right direction, I wouldn't be too worried about it. And it didn't sound like they were acutely elevated, or the doctor would have done something at the time. But yeah, so fibrosis is the next stage, which is the scarring, and then cirrhosis is we're always taught it was permanent, but even like right before I retired, the docs were talking about how there was, even now they're talking about how even some cases cirrhosis can be reversed, but the liver wants to heal itself. I mean, the liver is amazing, and even when you have fibrosis, it can heal itself. And we saw decreases in fibrosis scores, because we would do FibroScans all the time in our office, and we would see improvement in those fibrosis scores when people did the lifestyle changes. So let's see. So she says, I told him I was carnivore and he was okay with it. He was so stoked with everything else, he let it go. Awesome.
That is
Yeah.
great.
So it might've been the vancomycin.
Yeah, and he could have just been assuming too. Like, I mean, sometimes you can get context clues to, with labs and other things, and you think, oh, this must be worsening. But without actually doing the scan, like Lynn was talking about, you can't actually know that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And the doctor, I don't know if it was a gastroenterologist or primary doctor, but hopefully would know that if you're losing weight and you had fatty liver, your enzymes can go up. So yes, livers are amazing. They transplant half livers now and they grow into full livers. That's right. Yes, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
So they can do that now. So
that is just wild. I remember hearing about that, and it reminds you of what is it? There's creatures that can grow their tail back.
Like
some kind of salamander or something.
Salamanders.
Their tail comes off and they just grow a new one.
Yeah. So yeah. And honestly, the liver that grows back is not the size of a regular liver. It does end up being smaller than a regular liver, but it is a fully functional liver, and it does grow in size. So yeah, it's incredible. Livers are amazing. That's the thing. Like I had to retire, because of my mast cell activation syndrome, and I loved working in GI and hepatology because it's fascinating. Like I enjoyed it more than working in the hospital. It was just so interesting. But okay. All right. Next section is, Kim, you want to take it? Renal disease.
Renal disease. 1.2.2.5.3. Renal disease. Within the renal system, hyperinsulinemia can impair renal structure and function, both directly and indirectly. As the kidneys are a highly vascular organ, hyperinsulinemia induced vasoconstriction and/or hypercoagulability will have a profound effect on both overall kidney function and hypertension. However, the effects of insulin on the excretion rates of a variety of solutes, especially certain electrolytes and uric acid, have a profound effect on systemic metabolic functions. Hyperinsulinemia decreases renal excretion of uric acid by the kidneys. The resulting increase in uric acid has a potent but negative effect on overall metabolic health, along with an increased risk of gout. Hyperuricemia is well recognized to increase hepatic lipid accumulation, increasing the risk of NAFLD, and also stimulates production of ROS, increasing oxidative stress. Hyperuricemia also activates the renin-angiotensin system and independently impairs nitric oxide synthesis, causing vasoconstriction, thus increasing blood pressure and the risk of hypertension. While the precise mechanisms are still to be elucidated, it is recognized that sodium retention is coupled to uric acid retention and/or mediated by a lack of insulin signaling, insulin resistance. Other electrolyte disorders can also be attributed either directly or indirectly to hyperinsulinemia, especially potassium, magnesium, and phosphate depletion disorders. Hyperinsulinemia increases the activity of the sodium, potassium, and ATPase pumps, which promotes potassium's entry into many cells and may induce mild hypokalemia. Hypokalemia may be aggravated by hypomagnesemia, which may also be induced by an insulin mediated shift of magnesium from an extracellular to an intracellular space. Hyperinsulinemia can also cause an intracellular shift in phosphate concentrations, which may also be compounded by hypomagnesemia. The interconnected nature of electrolyte balances may also be affected by, amongst other factors, changes in serum osmolality, renal function, or systemic acidosis. Furthermore, insulin resistance is directly linked to declining glomerular filtration rate. The glomerular endothelial cells are also significant producers of endothelial nitric oxide synthase in response to insulin, so are also markedly affected by insulin resistance. Podocytes are also highly insulin responsive to allow the kidneys to manage necessary postprandial changes to glomerular filtration rate. Decreased insulin signaling within these cells is associated with changes associated with nephropathy, independent of changes in glucose concentrations, highlighting the importance of insulin's actions. Collectively, these factors demonstrate that hyperinsulinemia has a significant impact on renal function. Overall, the retention of uric acid has a profound impact on systemic metabolic health, given the increase in ROS and blood pressure and impact on endothelial health. However, even mild electrolyte disorders, while normally multifactorial in causation, also increase morbidity and mortality. That's interesting.
So everyone's talking about like, oh, the carnivore diet. Well, not everyone, but people outside the carnivore community talk about, oh, the carnivore diet is bad or a ketogenic diet is bad for your kidneys. But this basically says your insulin resistance is what's bad for your kidneys. You know, I mean, it's affecting everything. And I didn't know, I mean, I didn't realize how it would affected your electrolytes too. Your body's ability, your kidney's ability to properly filter your electrolytes.
And it's just like they always say, all of these electrolytes just, it's like a cascade. You know, you have a problem with one, you get a problem with the other ones.
Right, right. So interesting. So it didn't mention anything about the BUN or creatinine, but I'm assuming as your function decreases, your BUN and creatinine are going to go up, and your filtration rate's going to go down. So just another example of an organ that's impacted by insulin resistance.
But yeah, don't eat too much meat because you'll hurt your kidneys.
That's right. That's what they tell us. How much could I get for selling half my liver?
I'm keeping my liver, dadgummit.
$100. Oh my goodness! Yeah, we're having organ bartering organs in the background here.
Like, I'll see you a kidney and raise you a.
That's right. That's right. I'll trade you.
I'll loan you one of my kidneys, but don't touch my liver, because the worst, the sickest patients, most pitiful, just we couldn't even hardly do anything for them patients were the ones that get liver failure, and then the kidneys are super sensitive to any other organ having problems, and they are just like, I'm out. Mm-hmm. So you get that hepatorenal failure, renal and kidney failure. Yeah. It's a bad combo.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely a bad combo. and the worse they get with their liver, and then they end up with hepatic encephalopathy, which is in there. They can't think. I mean, all the ammonia, your liver clears ammonia, and when your liver can't clear ammonia, which is a byproduct of your blood cells, the blood cell cycle, it goes to the brain. And I know when I was trying to help our liver patients, very often I was communicating with their spouse or significant other, because you could not do care with the patient themselves. So it was, pretty bad. Take good care of your liver for sure. And your kidneys. So yeah, interesting. Okay. All right. So the next one is cardiovascular disease, 1.2.2.5.4. So all forms of cardiovascular disease are aggravated by hyperinsulinemia at the level of the macro and microvasculature and the heart. As previously described, insulin activates eNOS. I don't remember what that is. Do you guys remember what that is? Can someone look that up while I read? Because I don't remember. But insulin activates eNOS, which maintains vascular tone. Oh, nitrous oxide, probably. Is that?
Yeah, but the E is something else. It's
Well, I thought the NO was nitric oxide.
Is it nitric oxide system or something?
Yeah. Endothelial nitric oxide synthase.
Synthase. There we go.
Your endothelium is your blood vessel lining.
Okay, so endothelial nitric oxide synthase. Got it. Okay, I made a note. Okay, so which maintains vascular tone and endothelial health, which makes sense that it's also endothelial health, now that we know what that is, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's why these nitric oxide supplements are helping people, because, whether you or not you're for supplements or whatever, it can help you kind of get a jump start on, the production of that again.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So, however, hyperinsulinemia is in the same endothelial cells, drives pro-inflammatory, pro-atherogenic, pro-thrombosis, and vasoconstrictive pathways. This increases the risk of ischemic heart disease at both the macro or myocardial infarction, which is a heart attack, and microvascular ischemic stroke, vascular dementia, retinopathy, nephropathy levels. These conditions are compounded by hyperglycemia. More importantly, impaired endothelial health will impact the complete body and may act synergistically with many other pathological states, such as impaired nervous signaling, to intensify disease states such as renal disease or erectile dysfunction. Hyperinsulinemia also impairs many coagulation processes, both directly and indirectly. Many coagulation factors, including thrombin and fibrinogen, are hepatically synthesized or in the liver. Production is increased in the presence of hyperinsulinemia, leading to a hypercoagulable state and an increased risk of thrombi. So basically, your blood's thin and you have an increased risk of clots. Within cardiomyocytes, chronic insulin resistance results in lipotoxicity and increased myocardial oxygen consumption, which decreases cardiac efficiency and increases the risk of heart failure. Although this is considered independent of myocardial ischemia, microvascular disease is a lack of nitric oxide will cause a compounding effect. Overall, when the effects of vasoconstriction, coagulation, hypertriglyceridemia, and impaired endothelial surfaces are considered, hyperinsulinemia is a leading etiological factor for the development of cardiovascular disease. Interestingly, insulin resistance is also associated with atrial fibrillation and its arrhythmogenesis. Okay, I didn't know that. Had you ever heard that, Kim? Working in all your work now.
No, but I want you guys to know, just in case you hear all this stuff going on, none of my neighbors were mowing before we started this, and now they're
I
all
don't hear
mowing.
it.
Like
That's
literally,
funny.
I don't hear
literally
it.
all of them are mowing.
They all decided to come out and mow their lawn.
So if y'all can't
Oh
hear
my
me,
goodness.
but no,
Mike says
I did not. I did not know that.
infarction is just fun to say.
I know what
That
he's thinking. He's putting a T in there,
it
another
sounds
T.
really close to fart, right? Because that's right. All guys are still in middle school. Oh my gosh. Not sure if I asked this before, but is insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome the same thing? No. So metabolic syndrome is there's 5. I mean, it's a component of it, but there's actual 5 markers, right? To diagnose metabolic syndrome. And we
I think
covered
you have to have so many. I've heard different things. I've heard a couple of different things on that, but it's like you have to have several, at least 3 of those.
right.
And so
Right.
it's high blood
Yeah.
pressure, high, let's see, high glucose, right? Elevated glucose, overweight, like it's that waist to
Waist,
The waist
circumference,
waist to height ratio. Blah, 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 blah.
fasting glucose,
triglycerides.
Yeah.
triglycerides,
High
HDL
triglycerides,
cholesterol.
low HDL. Yep. And
Low
then,
HDL. Yeah.
So large waist, high triglycerides, reduced HDL, increased blood pressure, and elevated fasting blood sugar.
And you know what's funny is I always think that I'm not metabolically healthy, but I really either I barely fit the criteria or I don't fit. Like I don't think I even I don't even have very many of those things.
Me neither. Even at my highest weight, let's see, I only met one of these criteria, which was the waist circumference.
Well, the fasting glucose for me, I have always been like 101, you know. I mean, it would be barely, but I mean, it still counts in horseshoes. Just saying.
It actually depends on the time of day when I have my fasting glucose tested. Generally, if it's like late in the morning, it's like in the 70s, you know, right around between 70 and 80. But if it's early in the morning, I mean, it's going to be higher. It's in like the upper 90s, or even it's been like over 100. And of course, do not go see Alice Cooper and Rob Zombie before you go get your blood work done.
I love Rob Zombie.
I know, I love Rob Zombie too.
Did I tell you that you remember IRC chat years ago? It was like the first it's called Internet Relay Chat.
Yeah,
it was like the nerdiest of the nerds were on there because most people didn't even know how to work the internet yet. My very first chat name was Rob Zombie's wife.
All right.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Because I was just trying to think of something and I was like, I love Rob Zombie. How about Rob Zombie's wife?
That is great.
Oh, that's hilarious. That's awesome. All right. So, Carrie, you want to take the next section?
All right. Nervous systems. 1.2.2.5.5. As previously discussed, neurons are not insulin dependent. However, their high expression of INSR. Okay, what is that? Refresh my memory. INSR makes them susceptible to insulin resistance. INSR.
I can't remember.
All right, let me look it up.
Yeah, I need to take more notes.
It took me to Instagram. I don't think that's it. It stands for insulin receptor.
Insulin receptor.
Oh, okay. Okay. However, their high expression of insulin receptors makes them susceptible to insulin resistance, which impairs nerve signaling and communication. This can lead to a myriad of neuropathic and related disorders, both centrally and peripherally. There are also many indirect mechanisms whereby hyperinsulinemia causes significant neuronal dysfunction. Glycemic stress will lead to an accumulation of ROS and glycemic end products, resulting in inflammation and impaired neuronal signaling. Significant fluctuations in CNS glucose concentration promote inflammatory processes by increasing the production of ROS and impairing glutamate activity, which can result in neurotoxicity and or confusion or impaired memory. Endothelial damage and vasoconstriction will lead to ischemic disease with microthrombi, potentially accelerating hypoxic damage and apoptosis. In the central nervous system, this results in cerebral vascular disease and transient ischemic attacks, ischemic stroke, or vascular dementia. While in the peripheral system, ischemic disease leads to the progression of microvascular disease, including impaired wound healing, retinopathies, and nephropathies. Okay, nephropathies.
Yeah.
I believe that's right. Okay, had to get it out. Okay.
So it says neurons are not insulin dependent, so they don't need insulin, but yet they have a lot of insulin receptors. Is that what I'm reading here?
That's sort of my
Or have expression of insulin
interpretation.
receptors?
But
So
it's-
okay, so they don't need insulin to function, but they still have a lot of insulin receptors, so they can become insulin resistant.
It says they're not insulin dependent, so maybe.
So this is confusing to me
Yeah.
because it does talk about they can become insulin resistant, which impairs nerve signaling and communication, which makes them sound like they are insulin dependent, or maybe they're glucose. Maybe it's, I'm confused by this section. So
Your
I
high
have to,
expression of insulin. What did we say that was? Receptor
insulin receptors.
Mhm.
makes them susceptible to insulin resistance, which impairs nerve signaling and communication. This is kind of confusing.
It is confusing. Yeah.
It says it was
So-
previously discussed, so maybe wherever it was previously discussed is where they.
So
where
neurons.
they
Oh yeah,
play.
maybe we need to go figure out, like, where was it? I wish they would have put a little reference, like which page was it previously discussed
Exactly,
on?
because I'm lost a little
I
bit
don't
here.
remember.
I mean, I wonder how
let's
far
see.
back it was.
Okay, maybe it's page 25,
Okay.
because
what I was
the page
looking at.
25 it talks about the nervous system. Pleiotropic effects. Did we define that? It talks about insulin's
I
pleiotropic.
think we did at the time, but I don't recall.
Okay, guys, we're gonna have to start looking stuff up here, because if we want to understand this,
Mm-hmm.
we gotta figure this one out. Okay, PLEIO.
Oh, okay. Look, it's right here. It's right here. It says neurons are considered insulin responsive rather than insulin dependent. It says while insulin is essential for both central and peripheral neuronal growth via activation of the AKT pathways, due to the predominant expression of GLUT1 and GLUT3, neurons are considered insulin responsive rather than insulin dependent.
Okay, so they respond to insulin instead of needing insulin to do something. So
Okay.
if there's too much of it, then it can mess them up. But they don't have to have it. They don't have to have insulin.
It says, let me just read the next paragraph. Maybe it'll.
Okay. Yeah.
It says, in the central nervous system, insulin is transcytosed across the blood-brain barrier, whereas insulin receptors are widely expressed, especially in the hypothalamus, hippocampus, and cerebral cortex, all of which are involved in regulating metabolic homeostasis. Brain insulin signaling is pivotal for regulating the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, promotes synaptic plasticity, influences proliferation of glial cells, and has a central role for glycemic control with mechanisms yet to be fully determined, thus highlighting insulin's significant role within the brain. I don't know that answered it, but.
So pleiotropic means producing more than one effect, like multiple phenotype expressions. So it's saying that insulin basically functions in more than one way. And so in the nervous system, it says it affects glucose and energy homeostasis indirectly. Whereas I guess the rest of the body, it directly affects the glucose and energy homeostasis. This is indirect.
Maybe it has something to do with, you know, how you can, like, neurons are like excitable, like the more sugar I think something has, the more like excitability it could bring. Like maybe they function fine without it, but then they're able to take up more to be extra. I don't know. I'm kind of making this up.
Well,
it sounds as good as anything I could come up with right now.
Where's Dr. Nelson when you need him?
Yes, Dr. Nelson.
Yes, Dr. Nelson, help us. Or Cynthia, did you go away? Help us with this. Yeah. So it basically says, so normally insulin works with glucose, right? But here in the nervous system, it activates this AKT pathway. So maybe it's just working with a different mechanism when it comes to the nervous system. So it's like the nervous system still needs the insulin, but it just does a different job. Is kind of putting it in really, really simple terms. So I don't know. It's a little confusing.
I'm thinking I get what the insulin responsive versus dependent means. I'm just trying. I'm having a hard time putting it into words. But it's like I respond if somebody hits me, but I don't need you to be around me to just do what I do. So I'll respond. But
yeah, that was kind of like my my example there. Only I didn't say it in those words. Like you're hyper excitable when we hit you.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're maybe in our primitive way. We're.
Oh, listen, it doesn't matter because listen, it's a novel field of research. Evidently, it says insulin signaling in the CNS, central nervous system, has emerged as a novel field of research since decreased brain insulin levels and or signaling were associated to impaired learning, memory, and age-related neurodegenerative diseases. Yeah, so you could read a whole thing on it. It's on the National Institute of Health. Okay. I mean, it sounds like it's pretty complex. It's not just us that doesn't totally understand it.
Good.
Sandra says, are any of us qualified to understand this book? Probably not. We're trying.
I'm tempted to read this paper just to see if I can make heads or tails of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike says she expects to get a certificate when we finish the book and continuing education credits. Yeah, no kidding.
I'll print you up a certificate
with at least a shiny gold star. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, that'll definitely work.
But we can't make it official because we don't really know if we're supposed to be reading this aloud on the internet or not.
Well, we're allowed to read it. We're just not allowed to pretend like we know what we're talking about.
Well, I don't know if we're allowed to read it or not, but since we're breaking it up, I guess it would be fair use because we're not just reading it. We're like reading and then discussing.
Discussing. Yeah. Haven't had any copyright strikes.
Knock on wood.
Oh my goodness. Okay, well we can do the one last section and the little part, and then we can stop and then let's see, where do you guys want to stop? You want to do the let's see. Well, you guys want to keep going for a little bit, or where are you at? I mean, I'm trying to figure out a quick normal place, a good place to start. Why don't we finish the neuro stuff? And then we can
okay.
Yeah. And then we can start next time with the skeletal and structural support part. And that'll give us plenty of to talk
It's
about.
getting pretty dark. It's getting ready to storm here.
Okay. All right. Well, then we can stop here. Then we can stop here. So we will stop and we'll pick up next week with the neurological and neuropsychiatric disorders.
Yeah.
So, and maybe between now and then we can figure out what this whole thing, nervous system is when it comes to insulin. Kim, you go read that paper.
Yeah. I'm in Kentucky, Mike. He was asking where I was.
Oh, okay. Yeah. 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 You're adding so much commentary. Yes. Very used. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're adding a lot of commentary for sure. So
it is. I mean, it just got like really dark really quick, and this wind picked up, and I'm like, oh, okay. We're gonna get a storm now. This is Kentucky.
Yeah. So far, we've been okay without a banner. I haven't had.
I don't think you actually have to have a banner because, like, the law's the law. I mean, it doesn't really matter what you say. Yeah. It either is breaking the rules or it's not.
Yeah.
I've had a couple times where I've played some music or played a video that had background music on my channel, and I've gotten like the copyright, but it would never turn into a strike because I appealed it, and it was like, oh, okay, as long as I explained why I was using it.
Well,
it was fine.
And that's different because you're playing music. You're not like adding anything to that. Like, you're not breaking down the, what the song means, or like you have to add something to it, is my understanding. But
yeah,
I'm no expert.
I got notified by YouTube when I did my video with my when my daughter got married, and we did I posted a video of the father-daughter dance, and like a presentation with all the pictures and stuff. And the song, I got the copyrighted the song, but I explained that this was, I mean, we even hired someone, and we kind of changed it up, and we hired someone else to sing it and perform it. And so I explained what it was all about, and they like, no problem. I think it's the person who holds the copyright. So it must have been like the record company or someone that has to.
It's usually up to the, like we did, my sons play music, and we'll always, I'll show their videos of them playing their songs on YouTube, and I always get a copyright, warning basically. And it just, they let the person, like Metallica gets to the side, and Metallica actually lets us keep it up. I'm surprised, but it being Metallica.
Well, but it benefits them, right? It benefits them to
Metallica, but
play their music.
They allow you to keep it up, but you can't make any money off of it, and it can't be shown in certain countries. It's looking like it's
okay. We better
Kentucky. We might get a tornado at any moment.
We better sign off and let Kim get indoors.
Yeah.
All right,
guys. Well, thanks for coming and joining us. And
sorry, I was late.
That's okay. You didn't miss anything, and come join our Sunday book club. We're talking about a lot of fun stuff there too. And if not, we'll see you next week.
Okay, bye guys.
Bye.